Hello all, Rick here, and this time fulfilling a requested personnel file on one B'elanna Torres of Starfleet, then the Maquis, and then Starfleet again. As usual in this series, I will draw from the primary continuity of the shows and then bring in some apocrypha where applicable, so long as it does not contradict with on-screen canon. But first up, there is a bit of a discrepancy around her birth year and when exactly her father left based on what has been stated on screen. In this instance, books and the like have not helped either, as several go with one answer and others would choose a different one. But we'll get to that as we look at her record. She was born on Kessik 4 in 2346, the daughter of a human father, John Torres, and a Klingon mother, Miral. Miral was the only Klingon resident of Kessik, which she often found ostracizing. Other records have her being born in 2349, but it's the least used and the age lines better with the 46 year. So we'll go with that. In 2351, John Torres left when she was 5, and the young B'elanna suspected that he did so because he could not handle both her and her mother's Klingon temperaments. This caused her to begin to resent her Klingon heritage, an anxiety which would stay into her adult life. At some point around this time, she also drowned at the Sea of Gatan on Beta Z, but was resuscitated by her mother. In 2354, she saved the life of Evra Kunal in a fire chute on Kessik, however. This source also lists John leaving during this time, which would have made her 10. The only canon fact we have is that B'elanna was 5 when it happened. Around 2355, when she was in grammar school, she tampered with a playground gyro swing that severely hurt Daniel Bird before assaulting him for bullying her. After 2355, her and her mother moved back to Kronos for a time, and B'elanna was withdrawn from her Federation schools. In 2366, at the age of 20, she left her mother and home behind, enlisting in Starfleet Academy. Here she studied with the intent to pursue an engineering position, taking astrotheory alongside engineering courses, the mandatory courses such as survival strategies and interstellar history, of which she almost failed. Outside of study, she also enrolled in the decathlon team and was a very promising student. In 2368, she left Starfleet Academy, citing the rigid structure as the cause of her distress. Files list her as 19 during this, but she would have more likely have been 22. It is noted, however, that Professor P. Chapman made an addition to her record supporting any reapplication to Starfleet should she choose to return. She did not return to Kronos, however, as she did not talk to her mother since the days she left for Starfleet. So what exactly she gets up to in this time is her own business. In 2370, 2 years later, the paramilitary organisation known as the Maquis officially formed, revealing itself to the Federation in opposition to the Cardassian Federation Demilitarized Zone Treaties of 2367. This organisation recruited many disillusioned Starfleet officers, displaced colonists, and had many sympathisers. One such recruit was Torres. A few months after its formation, former officer Chakotay rescued B'elanna from a Bolian freighter that had been attacked by Cardassians and took her to Rivia Prime, where Torres joined up. She joined up with his resistance cell and crew of the SS Liberty as chief engineer. When that ship was destroyed, they transferred to the Geronimo, then to the Spartacus. This ship too was eventually destroyed, and B'elanna followed Chakotay to the SS Voyager, continuing to serve as his constant chief engineer. She may have even served alongside Tom Paris' only mission, but that is unclear. In 2370, on her first command mission for the Maquis, she was trapped in a cavern system with her team for 3 days after mistaking ambient energy for signs of the industrialization of a Cardassian outpost. Her technical skills came into use in this year when the Maquis captured the ATR-4107 smart missile and reprogrammed it. She set the target as Echelon 5, but it passed through the Badlands and was not seen again, later to have been found to be snatched up by the Caretaker array. In 2371, the SS Voyager was chased into the Badlands by Gullah Vec and was also claimed by the Caretaker array. After arriving in the Delta Quadrant, the Voyager was lost, but the crew transferred to the USS Voyager NCC 74656, and B'elanna Torres was granted the provisional rank of Lieutenant Junior grade and assigned to the engineering team. Here she operated under Lieutenant Joe Carey's team, who was acting chief engineer after the former chief was killed. During this time, she assaulted him, breaking his nose. Despite the reprimand, she was assigned as chief engineer due to her experience and ingenuity by Captain Catherine Janeway. This year she was captured by Vidians, who separated her Klingon and human DNA into two entities to find a cure for the phage. The Klingon B'elanna DNA was recombined back into her human form, restoring her back to herself. Also during this year, she and several other members of the crew violated the Prime Directive by trying to acquire a Sikaran spatial trajector illicitly. In 2372, she was tasked with repairing the Prelor and Kravik units and learnt a great deal about robotics. This year she also re-encountered the Dreadnought missile that had been caught in the Badlands and had to neutralise it. In 2374, Torres was arrested on Maquis for sharing violent thoughts, but was proved innocent and released. 2375 saw her become the host of a cytoplasmic lifeform which attacked her and used her as a life support until it was removed. She also developed a habit of putting herself in dangerous situations, such as the holodeck with no safety protocols active, in an attempt to deal with grief. This year she helped design the Delta Flyer shuttlecraft too. In 2376 she had a near-death experience that took her, maybe, to the realm of Grethor. In 2377 she married Lieutenant Tom Paris. 2378 the USS Voyager arrived home through a Borg transwarp conduit, and she gave birth to her daughter, Miral Paris. Upon returning to the Alpha Quadrant, Torres and most of the Voyager crew were pretty much celebrities for their epic journey they had made, and her position in Starfleet was officialised, her time in the Maquis excused, and she was promoted to Lieutenant Commander. That year, however, she and Paris took leave and travelled to Boreth to reunite with her mother, Miral. Unfortunately, she had to perform the Klingon ritual of Hechbat on her mother after she was fatally injured by a beast she had been hunting. She and Tom Paris moved to Boreth for a time to learn about the prophecies surrounding their daughter, the young Miral, who matched the foretelling of the Kuvan Mach. In 2380, Miral was kidnapped by a Klingon sect and became the focus of much controversy for a time. In 2382, they may have had a second child, Michael Owen Paris, but this has not been mentioned on screen, and we are entering into territory that the canon is still writing now, so that'll do for this video. The biggest issue B'elanna has faced in her career is her own disruptive behaviour holding her back. This is exacerbated by her denial over her Klingon heritage, which caused her to suppress those aspects of her personality that she dislikes, namely her temper. This faded with time, however, as she grew, and she is also completely aware of her own shortcomings, making an effort to eventually embrace them and allowing her to form a more complete identity. Torres has a strong problem-solver's mindset to her, as she does enjoy tackling engineering conundrums and finding creative solutions. This does lead her to become both frustrated and obsessive when answers elude her, and she has been known to forego sleep in favour of spending hours or more trying to fix things. She is very competitive, resenting losses almost as a personal affront, whether professional, recreational, or even personal. This obsessive streak often meets with her stubbornness, which has led her to act out on her own regardless of orders, whether Starfleet or Maquis. Although these rogue elements can bring her into conflict with authority, she often feels guilty for undermining those she respects and makes an effort to uphold their values as part of her own. She is generally honest and upfront with her opinions and feelings, but far more evasive when it comes to personal matters and defensive of people trying to psychoanalyze her. Eep. It seems that placing too many operational restraints on B'elanna and demanding conformity from her is the quickest way to force her into becoming uncooperative. Doing the opposite allows her to best flex her own creative ingenuity and intellect. In terms of hobbies, she embraces most physical sports, having shown great promise in them at the Academy, but despite this she often avoids stereotypical Klingon activities such as combat programs, which is pretty ironic considering that she is quite capable of holding her own in a fight and, if in a bad mood, is also quite capable of picking one. The only time we get a good look at her hobbies, however, is during the episode Extreme Risk, which can hardly be said to be her usual pick, considering her state of mind at the time. During this time she was struggling with the depression of losing the Maquis, and that too became an ongoing part of her development. After long rejecting her Klingon heritage and writing off most of it as superstition, postulating and even barbaric, she begins to show an interest out of respect and acceptance in Klingon culture after a time, often in the more spiritual aspects. This ultimately led her to have a greater understanding of Klingons, her mother in particular, and herself. But this is not a short change, it is an ongoing challenge for her spread over the entire series, a strong example of character growth, and like many things that she chooses to tackle, it has to be on her terms. She has admitted to deliberately pushing people away before they can leave her, because it protects her from being hurt, but eventually finds happiness and acceptance with not just Tom Paris, but the Voyager crew. For some B'elanna-specific episodes, Day of Honor shows her initial attitude towards Klingon tradition, relationships and loss, and a good episode to get a handle on her own internal struggles. Dreadnought is a good example of how her priorities have shifted with time, and Lineage is a pretty good display of where she ends up towards the end of the series. Of course, there are many more examples of B'elanna, and alongside Paris, she undergoes a coherent and well-shown character development throughout the entire series, appearing in most episodes. So, thanks for watching this file. I usually like to add a bit more beta content, but I couldn't really find much else outside of the info in the shows, outside of the Voyager relaunch series, which is probably very much its own canon by now. Thanks again, and let me know what this file glosses over, there is always something, and until next time, I've been Rick. Goodbye.